Hey now, good morning. Happy Thursday. PSW staff, clients, and friends joining us. Hey, so big week of movie palaces. We're closing it up today, this week, with maybe the most famous, because we looked at Pantages, we looked at Cinerama Dome, and then today we're going to look at one of the most famous and take a look at a guy, because it's named after him, Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Hooray for Hollywood! That's gooey ballyhooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
Sid Grauman's interesting. He's born in 1879. If you think of that, Wagner is still alive. So just to put things in perspective, he's still writing operas. So this is really long ago. You know, if we think of... And we did a class on the Hollywood sign and how Hollywood really was incorporated in the early 1900s. Grauman really is responsible for bringing Hollywood to the actual location of Hollywood. He's moving Hollywood. Early films were shot downtown LA and then kind of Edendale area, kind of near Silver Lake. It wasn't Hollywood at first. They didn't come out to Hollywood at first. Those were the neighborhoods that they were shooting movies. It wasn't until, well, the Egyptian theaters opened in 1922. So it wasn't until around the early 20s is when Hollywood really became known as being Hollywood. Before then, people, I don't think, wanted necessarily the movie industry there or weren't interested in having it there. They had kind of discovered this perfect climate, perfect neighborhood where you have Beechwood Canyon and the Hollywood, sign there. And Grauman kind of invented or had at least, the very first Hollywood premiere of a movie at the Egyptian Theater. So he brought in a lot of stuff that was very interesting that changed, show business as we know it. We still do these things. We still have red carpets. We still have premieres. So he did that first with Robin Hood at the Egyptian Theater in 1922. And 22 is interesting because they were on the run to discover King Tut's tomb in 1922. And so there was kind of all this Egyptian craze going on. And I think that's why he was influenced to make it an Egyptian-like theater, although there's a lot of Hispanic elements in the architecture. So it's a mixture of Hispanic and Egyptian, stuff going on. It's a beautiful building, still there. And then they discovered King Tut a few weeks after the theater opened, so it was kind of like this really great timing of it. But going back to Grauman, his parents were vaudeville. He was in vaudeville. His dad, they worked a lot of the circuits and created a pretty successful vaudeville company, and that extended to Minneapolis and Oregon. And he started incorporating motion pictures, flickers, little movie shows working as a paperboy as a kid. He discovered something very important. He said that people will invest in entertainment. You can get people to buy something they'll get them to buy something if you can entertain them. And he learned that as a paperboy, and he used that the rest of his life. People will pay for entertainment, which obviously is very true today. We don't want to pay for a car, for a car to be fixed, but we'll pay for a video game, or we'll pay for, Netflix every month. That's just the way it's always been. So he was very smart with that. So his dad, he and his dad had a pretty good business going. The 1906 earthquake happened in San Francisco because they were mostly doing these shows up in San Francisco, and that kind of wrecked everything. But he was still involved in early motion pictures, learning, screening them and understanding how they worked. And so they went to San Jose. So they went south below San Francisco. And 1903, they opened the Unique Theater in San Jose. That got destroyed too. But it kind of stuck out to me because this is still before he gets to LA, gets to Hollywood. So San Jose might have been the first movie palace in a sense that I didn't even know. But when he gets to Hollywood, he's asked to build, a big movie palace. And the first one he builds is the $1 million movie palace in downtown. But really, the ones we're going to be focusing on are the Egyptian Theater and the Chinese Theater. So Robin Hood, starring Douglas Fairbanks, is the premiere of 1922. And that's when it opens. And that's a year before the Hollywood sign goes up. So Hollywood is, with the Roaring '20s, Hollywood is becoming a town, a little before the '20s too, but is becoming a town where it's associated with production, show business, and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily a town where actors and celebrities lived, but it's where studios took place. So, if you think of the '20s, we have prohibition going on, but a lot of technology is started. Radio is becoming the big thing, and then of course, silent films start kind of going, extinct because the talkies come in. And the talkies come in 1927, and that's the year that Grauman opens his next theater, which is literally down the street. Starts building it in 1926, but by 1927, his Chinese Theater opens. And many of the things in there were imported from China on the trips that Sid would take. And Chinese artisans were brought to create works of sculpture. And they were originally located in the theater's forecourt and now housed inside the theater. And as we know, it was an accident how it happened, but it's also the spot where people would put their prints on in front of the theater. And there's a few rumors of who started who, but he did confirm that it was an accident, somebody stepping in on the, before the cement got dry. And he thought, what a great publicity stunt and a great way to get people, and it really was, to get people, celebrities most importantly, to put their handprints there. And the Chinese is one of the largest theaters in North America, almost about 930 seats, and it's hosted two of the Academy Awards from 1944 to 1946. It was the first Academy Awards that wasn't hosted in a hotel, because we looked at the Coconut Grove, and that was at a hotel, and that was in 1939. So what also stands out are the wax figures there, and people, thinking that they were real because they did look real. So, he really knew how to entertain people. He wanted to make sure that it was a night of pure entertainment with the shows going on before, the movies happening. And we talked about, feature films got going in the 20s, but before then, they were very short films, film reels put together. But with the Chinese, you have huge premieres. And when we say premieres, I'm not, think about it. It's the first time people saw Star Wars there. So Star Wars premieres there. But going back, it's A Farewell to Arms, The King and I, West Side Story, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Jungle Book, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. These movies we still talk about today, and so they all premiered there at the Chinese. And he really made history, and also knew the elegance of building a really wonderfully beautiful theater, giving people the chance of, I'm going to sell you a ticket. It's not going to be cheap, but you're going to be very comfortable in this really cool environment. So Sid Grauman lived for about 35 years at the Ambassador Hotel, which we looked at, of course. So that was his home. But he spent the last 6 months of his life at Cedars-Sinai, not because he was sick, but because he'd go to these, he'd go and eat and go to these movie premieres and go to restaurants all, there, and then he would just go back to the hospital to sleep, because the hospital was located more, central to all the, more central in Hollywood to all the theaters and restaurants. So a little bit of an odd guy, but knew how to sell things, knew what people wanted, knew that entertainment was a way to get people excited. And now Netflix owns the Egyptian, which is interesting because I mean they kind of, some people would call them responsible for taking down theaters, but I think it's a good thing. I think that they're going to host premieres. They're going to show, the Egyptian shows a lot of old movies. I saw 2001 Space Odyssey there, and it was so fun. And some other movies, and the Chinese theater is always a fun experience. It's great that these movie theaters and palaces are still going on. So Sid Grauman, very important to our city, and great that these theaters still exist. So I hope you enjoyed Chinese theater. David Zimmerman just told me that Honey Bunny is going to be playing there at the end of January, so maybe you can get passes to go see that beautiful theater. I saw Top Gun Maverick there just about a year ago. It was just such a pleasure being in those seats around all that history. So I loved that. Okay, tomorrow film scoring results for Punch Drunk Love. We made it through our first week back. So good to be back with you guys. Love you, and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.